Hi, I'm Joe Stark, creator of the fantasy adventure series The Unscarred. If you like what you hear today, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Now, on to the show.
On the world of Faereyas, a god made flesh is born every 500 years. These beings are known as the Chosen, but the world will come to call one of them the Unscarred. The Unscarred, written by Joe Stark.
Chapter 11. The Pillars of the Dead. The camp was deathly quiet. The Ka warriors were solemn and silent as they hurriedly stowed their gear, anxious to distance themselves from the sight of the storied and tragic battle of Karisfan, the Pillars of the Dead. Hoke and Eric watched the Ka as they worked. Hoke wore a suit of lightweight leather armor of Ka design, the base layer for his Black Mantis armor. After the Farron had returned from the Valley of the Mantis, an armorer from Galen's company had immediately set to work on Hoke's armor. It would soon be ready to graft onto Hoke's leather armor, affirming his status as an elite warrior of the Z-Ka. Eric felt eyes upon him as he stood in the center of the camp. He looked around. Every Ka in sight was busy about their own agenda, yet the feeling persisted. Eric closed his eyes and concentrated on the sensation. It emanated from the northeast, away from the camp, but not far. With a caress of his will, his astral form separated from his body and rose into the air. He willed himself higher, rising above the tops of the petrified stonewood corpses. Looking down at the forest spread below him, he saw the boundary of the Pillars of the Dead. It was a perfect circle, over a mile in diameter. The land within was gray and lifeless, testament to the awesome power that had been unleashed here over 500 years before. The epicenter of the battle between Chosen, where James had obliterated Alana the Fallen. With a thought, Eric returned to his body and opened his eyes. Unnerved by the persistent sensation of being watched, the young Chosen decided to investigate. "I need to stretch my legs," said Eric, glancing at Hoke. "I'm going for a walk." Hoke continued to watch the armored warriors at work dismantling their camp. "The Ka will soon be finished here." Eric nodded in affirmation. "I won't be long." He made his way through the camp, heading northeast toward whatever it was that watched him from afar. The soil beneath his feet was dark and sandy. Wisps of dust rose with his footfalls, coating the leather of his boots in its ashy film. The feeling grew with each step forward, building into an ominous pall that cast its malevolent shadow over the barren field of dead stonewoods. Eric approached a pillar and placed his hand upon the weathered stone surface. Stripped of its protective bark, the petrified minerals within the tree's cellular structure could be seen glinting in the afternoon sunlight. A wave of dizziness washed over Eric. He staggered and gripped the stone for support. His vision swam in the abysmal gray of the land swirled before him and turned to a lush green. His vision returned and he blinked in surprise. The forest around him was in the full vigor of life. A small noise behind him caught his attention. A Ka warrior in purple armor stood guard less than 6 feet away. The man looked past Eric as though the young Chosen were invisible. "Hello?" said Eric. The warrior continued to stare forward. He gave no indication that he heard or saw Eric standing before him. Eric looked about. More Ka warriors could be seen standing post around the forest. A large canvas tent stood nearby. It was ringed by a circle of blue-armored warriors. He made his way toward the tent, passing several more warriors along the way. Like the purple-armored warrior, they paid him no notice. He slipped between two of the blue-armored warriors and entered the tent. A large table dominated the center of the shelter. Its surface was overladen with maps and reports. Several Ka stood around the table. To a man they wore blue or purple armor, apart from one who wore black. Eric stared at the man in astonishment. He was gigantic. Eric had never seen a man so large. The giant stood 7 feet in height and was easily over 400 pounds of solid muscle. From the economy of his movement, Eric could tell that the man carried his bulk with ease, making him a fearsome opponent, one you wouldn't wish to cross swords with, his capacity for deadly action confirmed by his black armor. "You honor us with your presence, Alik," said the large man. Eric stood rooted in shock. "Can this giant see me?" he asked himself. He opened his mouth to speak, but was cut short by a youthful voice. "Were it for any other occasion," said a young Farron, stepping forth from a corner of the tent. Until he had spoken, Eric hadn't even noticed the boy. He was small and thin, but upon closer examination, the child exuded power and confidence far beyond that of his youthful appearance. He wore white silken clothing, a loose-fitting shirt jacket, and baggy pants. A leather rig crossed his upper body. It held 2 swords, their leather-wrapped grips visible above the boy's narrow shoulders. "I've just come from Faereyas," said the boy. "If Gabriel hadn't told me himself, I wouldn't have believed it. But it's true. Alana has gone mad. She destroyed the great library and gravely injured Helen. Gabriel hasn't left her side since." "The bitch has gone mad, all right," said the giant. He motioned toward the reports scattered across the table. "But I don't think you know the full extent, Ander." Eric stared at the boy. "Ander?" he incredulously thought to himself. He looked closely at the reports on the table. They held intelligence on enemy troop movements within Karas Fawn. Understanding dawned upon the young chosen. He was seeing events of the past. Certainly these were the penultimate days before the final battle of Karas Fawn. The giant picked up a report. After Faereyas, she appeared in Kar-2 and set her barbs into King Thenan. He was turned to her side. The power of the Kar-2 throne was used to hamper the flow of magic in Faereyas. Only with Thenan's complicity could that have happened, he pointed out. The large man picked up another report. Alana and Thenan launched his armada from the Farron capital and landed troops in the bay of Chris High, where they sacked the city. He picked up another report. Next, they marched on Charos Fen and in short order sacked the city. He grabbed another report, crumpling the parchment in his meaty fist. After Charos Fen, they besieged Charos Fey. Unable to directly engage the Zin-Ka in their mountain stronghold, they left a contingent of troops and siege engineers to keep pressure on them while Alana set her sights on Karas Fawn. Their army entered the forest 6 days ago and have been pushing north toward Karas Din, finished the giant. An aide-de-camp entered the tent. Mon Matavi Kadam, a bonded envoy from Terran Say, is requesting an audience, announced the man. Eric looked at the giant Ka in recognition. This was Kadam the Mighty. Eric had read tales of the fearsome Ka warriors' famed battles. "Let him enter," said Kadam. A finely dressed man entered the tent. He was of Farron descent, evident in his short stature and golden-hued skin. He wore a red robe and carried a leather satchel over his shoulder. An empty scabbard hung at his belt. "Tarvis," said Kadam in a friendly greeting. Eric looked from Kadam to the rest of the Ka warriors in the command tent. It was clear that the Mon Motavi's comfort with the Farron's presence was not shared by the others. They viewed the envoy with mistrust. Others showed an open hostility on their faces. Eric understood their feelings. Alana herself had once been counted a friend of the Ka. Tarvis bowed deeply. "I bring word from Terran Say. The Conclave is offering support. 300 mages skilled in the combat arts are willing to fight for you if you would have them." Kadam smiled in acceptance, but quickly froze at the sounds of steel clashing against steel. The aide-de-camp rushed into the tent. "Sir, the enemy's forces have broken through our line," shouted the man. Kadam looked toward Tarvis. "Get those damn mages here now," bellowed the giant as he pulled his sword. Any other man would have needed both hands to wield the great blade, but Kadam easily managed it with a single hand. Ander unlimbered his swords. They were slender and curved with a single edge. He handled them with practiced ease as he took up position near Kadam. "I'm with you, Mon Matavi," said the boy. It was clear that he intended to keep the Ka leaders safe from harm, though the appearance bordered comical due to their great difference in size. Though Ander was small in stature, the power of the Chosen was not reflected in size. Eric knew full well the level of destruction that boy could manifest where he pushed. Eric followed the pair outside. Warriors were running south through the forest, seeking to aid their overwhelmed comrades. Tarvis rushed from the tent. A blue-armored warrior tossed the Farron a sword. He quickly sheathed the blade as he surveyed a small clearing just behind the command post. As his gaze moved from left to right, mages materialized and dropped to the ground. Landing lightly on their feet, they rushed to catch the Ka already moving south, eager to join the fray. Kadam shouted orders to the fresh arrivals. The stream of mages jumping from Terransay continued unabated as Tarvis slowly swept his gaze back and forth across the small meadow. Everywhere the man looked, mages would appear. The flow of incoming mages slowed to a trickle and then stopped. With the last of them gone, Tarvis drew his sword and joined the guards standing near Kadam. Long shadows began to creep across the ground, stretching toward the Ka Mon Motavi. They flowed together and coalesced into a void of darkness. Ebon hands snaked out from the void, their clawed fingers raking against the soil as they fought to pull themselves from their shadowy realm. They took shape as they rose, humanoid, though they could only be discerned by their outlines. "Shadow assassins!" shouted the aide-de-camp from beside Kadam. A shadow rose before the man and lunged forward. The shape of its arm changed to that of a blade as it made contact with the man, running him through. The aide coughed and spit blood as he dropped to the ground, writhing in convulsions. Kadam swung his mighty blade at the creature, but it passed through it without effect. The shadow seemed to ignore Kadam as it turned and began to stalk toward another warrior. A purple-armored Ka screamed a battle cry and swung his sword, but once again a steel blade proved ineffective against the creatures. The assassin again lunged forward with its blade-like arm and pierced the Ka's chest through his armor as though the man fought naked. The remaining Ka warriors backed away from the advancing shadows. They knew their blades and armor were no match against the Ebon assassins. Ander leapt over the heads of the retreating Ka and landed amidst the shadows. He tightly grasped the hilts of his swords as the blades began to glow with a white-hot intensity. He dodged a strike from an assassin and swung his glowing blades. They bit deep into the ebon shape. With a loud shriek, the creature dissipated into a wisp of black smoke and disappeared. The young chosen pressed his attack, but the boy was outnumbered by the shadows 10-1. He swung his swords as he darted through the melee, killing assassins at will, but for every one of the creatures he killed, another would rise to take its place. Ander pointed a small finger at the ebon void and closed his hand into a fist. A column of fire blazed into being, consuming the darkness and closing the door to the shadow realm. The young chosen raced through the towering stonewoods, his glowing blades a blur as he hunted the remaining shadow assassins. The column of fire continued to burn and crackle when from within the flames a figure took shape. It stepped forth but remained silhouetted against the brightness of the fire at its back. "Is this another shadow assassin?" thought Eric as he watched with rapt attention. The figure slowly drew a long, slender blade from a back scabbard. Eric's eyes widened in recognition. It was the very sword that had inspired the creation of his own blade. The figure stepping from the flames was Alana the Fallen. Keeping her distance from Ander, she attacked the remaining Ka. Alana swung her long sword in a powerful arc and decapitated 2 warriors. Kadam bellowed a challenge and leapt forward to engage her, their great swords clanging together in a shower of sparks. The blue-armored guards rushed to help their Mon Motavi, but quickly met their deaths at the edge of Alana's long blade. Kadam pressed the attack against his smaller opponent, seeking to overwhelm her defense with force. Because she was a chosen, Eric knew that she couldn't be killed, but Alana's power had been subverted at Ander's birth, and she was no longer capable of instant regeneration. If Kadam could grievously wound her, he could win the day. Eric shook his head in resignation. He knew how the tides of this battle would flow. What Kadam could have done didn't matter. This was already settled history. Alana deflected a downward swing from Kadam, turning the larger blade aside. She spun out of the giant's reach and raised her free hand. She uttered a brief incantation and the Ka Mon Motavi was engulfed in blue flames. Kadam screamed in pain but continued to advance upon the fallen chosen. Alana lashed out with a powerful kick to Kadam's knee and dropped the large man to the ground. She raised her sword high in a killing stroke when a shrill young scream tore through the air. Ander leapt forward and blocked Alana's strike. He used his two swords to good effect, keeping the distance close to minimize the effectiveness of her longer blade. Eric watched as the pair crossed swords. Again and again, back and forth. The fight raged on, but again, Eric knew how this would end. As if on cue, Alana found an opening and pressed her advantage. Ander screamed as his left arm was cut away. Blood fountained from the stump and the young man swooned from the pain. He dropped to his knees and screamed at Alana, demanding to know why she was doing this, but the fallen chosen said nothing in return. Eric watched as she raised her arms and spoke a long series of incantations. The remaining warriors rushing forward to engage Alana went limp and crashed to the ground. The colors of the forest withered away as Alana's spell drained the life forces from everything in the vicinity. The plant life turned to ash under the magical onslaught. Limbs fell from the great stonewoods and crashed to the forest floor, sending up clouds of fine ashy particles that floated in the air like a low-hanging fog. The air shimmered and a man appeared. Eric recognized him, having seen the man once from afar when he was a child in Lant. It was James, the fifth chosen. James quickly looked around and shook his head. He fixed his gaze on Alana and spoke a single word. No. The energy building within Alana imploded and erupted outward. James knitted his brow in concentration as he redirected the energy and forced it downward into the ground with a resounding boom. Fresh clouds of ash rose into the air, turning the afternoon sunshine into a twilight haze. When the air finally cleared, Eric saw that both James and Alana had disappeared, leaving Ander alone among the dead stonewoods and desiccated skeletal remains of the Ka. The young chosen sat on the ground with his knees drawn up against his chest. He held his regenerated left arm tightly as he gently rocked back and forth. His clothing and face were dark and filthy with ash, but trails of clean golden-hued skin could be seen on his face as tears streamed from his unblinking eyes. Eric's vision once again swirled and he found himself alone in the Pillars of the Dead. He felt a crushing weight settle on his soul as he considered what Ander had gone through at such a young age. Eric was overcome with empathy for the young man and with tremendous loss over the taking of so much life. Eric swallowed a lump in his throat and pushed his rising emotions back down. He wiped the tears from his cheeks as he made his way toward Galen's troop. The mood was still subdued as they formed up. Eric thought to himself that Kasich was right. This was an inauspicious place. He was thankful when they finally set off for Karas Din and began to put distance between themselves and the Pillars of the Dead. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like, share, and leave a 5-star review for the show. If you would like a copy of the Unscarred, please see the Amazon link in the show notes. Hardcover, paperback, and digital copies are all available right now. And if you want to email the show, hit me up at erictheunscarred@gmail.com.